Welcome to Days at Dogwood Canyon, a nature podcast brought to you by Dogwood Canyon Audubon Center in Cedar Hill, Texas. This is a podcast that will take you into our 200-acre wildlife preserve in the heart of the DFW Metroplex. Take a quick weekly break with us and get outside with the fresh air, the trees, and of course, the birds. My name is Kirsten, and I'm Center Coordinator, Community Programs here at Dogwood Canyon Audubon Center. Welcome, listeners, to our Days at Dogwood Canyon podcast. This is a podcast about nature, birds, plants, and us. We will talk about how we all rely on each other to live our best lives. It's Valentine's Day, and I thought we'd talk about a bird that deserves some love. The title of this episode is Show the Limpkin Some Love. You may be thinking, as I was, what's a limpkin? Well, the limpkin is a water bird, brown with white striping on the neck and white dappling on the wings. It has long legs and a long beak. It is considered a large bird at 28 inches and weighs in at about 38 ounces. It kind of looks like a cross between a heron and a rail. It is found around water, whether that be a pond, lake, or slow-moving stream. It is most often seen in swamps and marshes. The limpkin, spelled L-I-M-P as in Paul, K-I-N, is classified in its very own family. Here in the United States, its northernmost range is Lake Okeechobee in Florida, or it used to be. Turns out, all of a sudden, it's a limpkin world. In Audubon magazine's Fall 2024 edition, an article titled, All of a Sudden, It's a Limpkin World, written by Scott Weidensaul, caught my attention for two reasons. First of all, I didn't know what a limpkin was. I had heard the name before, but I really couldn't tell you with certainty what kind of animal it was. And second, the subtitle said that these birds, who were typically restricted to Florida, were being seen as far north as Canada. That is a huge change in their range, and I wanted to know why. Okay, a little bit of background about limpkin behavior is necessary to set the scene for this amazing story. A century ago, limpkin sightings outside of Florida were so rare that ornithologists perked up and took notice with every new report. And we're not talking a sighting in Canada here. We're talking about a bird in southern Georgia, just above the Florida-Georgia state line. Limpkins were restricted to Florida as their main source of food was found there, the Florida apple snail. Now, this is not your average snail. It can grow to about the size of an average human's palm. Yes, you can hold it in your hand. Talk about some escargot. And that is exactly why the limpkin focused on these snails as their main food source. It was good eating. At the time that limpkins were so abundant in Florida, they were also good eating. But by the 1930s, naturalists reported that the limpkin was scarce in their native range due to overhunting by humans. So protections were established and their number rose, but they never ventured far from Florida. So this is where the story takes flight. Within the past decade, this once overlooked non-migratory bird has had the most extraordinarily rapid range expansion ever made by a native North American bird. It has gone from being an uncommon bird in a limited range to a rapidly growing population that has crept westward into Louisiana and Texas and is seen in eastern portions of Canada in warmer weather. At first, people thought this was a one-off, something that birders rushed from miles around to see, but it is becoming more and more common to see these birds in new ranges. So what happened to cause the unexpected population boom? Let's talk about their preferred food source for a moment. Limpkins can eat a variety of food, such as freshwater mussels, crayfish, reptiles, frogs, and a variety of snails. But they're so focused on apple snails that their decurved bill has evolved to curve slightly to the right at the tip of the lower mandible so they can more easily remove the apple snail from its shell. That's right, they have a built-in snail shucker. Wow. If an animal's body adapts to a specific food source, you know they are seriously reliant on that particular resource. There are many species of apple snails around the world, but there's only one native to Florida. In the late 1900s, other species of apple snails began to appear in Florida. Aha! Have we found the source of our increasing Limpkin population? Maybe. Stick with me for another minute. So the more prevalent new apple snail was the island apple snail from southern South America. Also known as the giant apple snail, it can reach sizes of 5 to 6 inches in diameter and weigh 3 or 4 times more than the native Florida apple snail. Whew, that is a big snail. Well, the apple snail did very well here in Florida. It lays 2,000 eggs at a time, as opposed to the 30 that the native Florida apple snail lays. The island apple snail can withstand a wider variety of temperatures, and they breed year-round. So they pretty much outcompeted the native snail by a mile, causing the native snail species to crash to critical levels. Well, conservationists panicked. The loss of this snail was devastating, but they weren't thinking about the limpkin. Now remember, I said limpkins were often overlooked. Conservationists were worried about the loss of the native Florida apple snail because it was the main diet of the endangered snail kite. This is a raptor that specializes in eating apple snails. Raptors, such as hawks, eagles, and kites, often overshadow other species of birds, and this is what happened here. The kites were just flashier than the limpkin, so the focus was on how the snail kite would be impacted by this invasion. And at first, it was bad. Snail kite populations plummeted because the larger invasive island apple snail was too big for the kites to carry, eat, or feed to their young. Now this is another twist within a twist. Unbelievably, within 10 years, snail kites adapted to the new food resource by developing longer, heavier legs, beefier bodies, and more robust beaks so they could catch, carry, and open the new snail. Whew. That is super fast, and that is survival adaptation in action. Scientists were amazed. But with all their attention on the kite, they were missing what was happening in the wings. Yes, that pun was completely intended. While the snail kites had some difficulty adapting to the new snail species, the limpkins did not. They took to it like a bird at a free buffet, which I guess it actually was. And when no one was looking, limpkin populations exploded. During the Christmas bird count of 2017, 4 limpkins were spotted in Louisiana. This was highly unusual, and Robert Dobbs, the non-game avian ecologist for Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, noticed. Birders were excited, and when 2 more were spotted a few weeks later at a marsh near Houma, Louisiana, birders flooded the state to get a peek. By 2021, the State Records Committee in Louisiana that reports rare bird sightings took the limpkin off the rare bird list because it had become such a regular presence. In 2022, they were everywhere in Louisiana. eBird data suggests that the limpkin's populations increased in the United States by 50%. Yes, that's 50% between 2012 and 2022. In 2021, limpkins were seen for the first time in Arkansas, Tennessee, on the Maryland-West Virginia border, and in Minnesota. In 2022, sightings were reported in Virginia, New York State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Now remember, previously this bird was never seen outside of Florida. The summer of 2022 was dubbed by birders the Hot Limpkin Summer. In 2023, limpkins were additionally spotted in Colorado, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Nova Scotia, and Ontario. The last two are in Canada, just in case you didn't know. Now, it's a nice change of pace to hear a story about an invasive species that helped a native species recover and flourish. I'm actually so excited that the limpkin is finally getting some love, but I must temper that excitement with a bit of concern. The limpkin is no longer in danger of disappearing from the swamps and marshes of the United States, yay, which is absolutely wonderful. But what kind of problems will we see in the future as this once uncommon bird takes over ecosystems they were never meant to live in? Most likely, the pressure this puts on other species will impact their futures. But today, we will take the win and give the limpkin some love.